My name is Ashley Tipton, and I did my research paper over Charlotte Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper. This is my audience member. You see, he does not believe I am sick. In Gilman's novel, The Yellow Wallpaper, a young woman slowly loses her grip on reality while being treated for hysteria. Her delusions soon begin to reflect her own oppression by her husband, her brother, and the world around her. The main character of this novel is closely related to the author herself, whom also suffered from what was then known as hysteria. This novel shows the readers how women were viewed and constructed as sick and weak beings. Gilman lived in a time when women's opinions did not matter. When she first published her novel, it was rejected by the Atlantic Monthly magazine and reviewed as being enough to make the readers miserable. After her daughter was born, Gilman began to suffer from postpartum depression. This disorder was unknown at the time, so she was diagnosed with hysteria. Hysteria was a disorder most common in women. Its symptoms included depression, anxiety, and excitability. Gilman was prescribed the rest cure, which involved isolation from family and friends and being placed on a strict bed rest schedule. The treatment failed, and Gilman continued to suffer from depression the rest of her life until in 1935 she committed suicide by chloroform. The setting of this novel takes place at a colonial mansion in the summertime. The main characters are Jane, the protagonist, her husband and physician John, and John's sister Jenny. Jane has gone into a gradual decline, losing interest in her family and her surroundings after the birth of her baby. Her husband, who is a physician of high standing, diagnosed her illness as hysteria. He has chosen the rest cure as her primary treatment, along with different medications. Jane's brother, also a physician, agrees with John's decision, leaving Jane with no choice but to go along with the treatment. Jane is kept in isolation in an attic room. John is in town most of the time, seeing to his other patients. Until he gets home, Jenny watches over her. Jenny sees that she takes her medication every hour and sleeps after every meal. Jane is forbidden to write, cook, clean, or care for her child. Her husband believes she is the cause of her sickness, and exerting energy will only make it worse. Even though she was told not to write, Jane keeps the journal hidden under her pillow in spite of her husband, although she admits it makes her feel bad. She is kept away from her child, whose name is never mentioned in the novel, but says their departure makes her nervous. Jane's room is very open and bright, with windows all around. There is a bed bolted to the floor with teeth marks on the legs. On the walls there are rings and barred windows. Of all these things, the worst is the yellow wallpaper. Although Jane does not know for a fact that the estate was once a boys' school, she states, "No wonder the children hated it." This implies that the narrator is already projecting her emotions onto others and identifying herself with people who aren't present. The wallpaper is described as a flamboyant pattern that is nearly impossible to follow. The curves of the paper suddenly commit suicide. The color is a dirty sulfur yellow and is sun-faded. The paper is torn and ripped in certain spots, and the floor in the room is scratched and splintered. There is a streaky smooch mark low on the wall that runs all around the room. Jane notices that the wallpaper has a yellow smell that is carried throughout the house. She soon believes that she is sparing her child from the terrors of the room. When John goes to town, he tells his wife that he must deal with serious cases, implying that Jane is not really sick. She begins to feel like a burden to both Jenny and John. John seems to enjoy having control over his wife. He has refused to give in to Jane's wishes to repaper the wall or to move into another room. He thinks giving in to her demands will only worsen her illness. He refers to Jane as a little girl, symbolizing his impression of her, weak, innocent, and dependent. When Jane confesses her fear of the wallpaper, John replies, "Bless her little heart, she shall be as sick as she pleases." His comments make Jane feel like her illness is not important enough for him to treat, making her think that she's an even bigger burden. Towards the end of the story, Jane's illness becomes more prominent, and readers soon realize she's becoming delirious. She sees a face in the wallpaper with a broken neck and two eyes staring at her. At night, she starts to see a figure form and move behind the paper. Jane is determined to figure out the secrets of the wallpaper. She soon becomes paranoid that John and Jenny will figure it out first. Jane begins to see a woman creep around her house. Now her hysteria has turned into pure madness. She finally sees a figure form into the wallpaper one night. It is a woman trapped behind bars, trying to break free. One day, while John is in town, Jane eludes Jenny into leaving her alone in the room. Jane begins tearing the wallpaper off as far as she can reach. She tries with all her might to move the bed, but ends in failure. Frustrated, she bites the leg of the bed. That night, she tries to free the woman in the wall. I pulled and she shook. I shook and she pulled. Jane secures a rope without the knowledge of her family and ties it around her waist. She throws her bedroom key out the window and decides to wait for John to show him what she had done. When John opens the door, he sees his wife creeping around the room, saying, "I've got out, at last, in spite of you and Jane." After seeing that his wife had gone insane, John faints on the floor. All the while, Jane continues creeping around the room, stepping over him. At the end of the novel, we see that Jane believed that she was the woman trapped behind the wallpaper. Similar to the way Jane was trapped by her husband and brother, we discovered that the smooch or smear on the wall and the teeth marks on the bed have been Jane the whole time. This makes the readers wonder, how long has she been mad? The story ends without an explanation or a shadow of what's to come.